Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to do a very casual first impressions for the story Magus of the Library. This is a true first impressions as this is only based off of the first volume of this story, but that first volume alone is enough for me to say that I'm rather certain that this is going to very quickly become a new favorite, as that first volume alone might be my favorite first volume of anything that I have read. Of course, with manga series, the first volume gives you some exposition. It's typically laying the foundation for what's to come. It's giving you some background information, and then the story really takes off as you go. And something I think a lot of manga readers have to accept when they're giving recommendations is that they have to tell people, well, you just got to get to this volume and then I promise the payoff is great. And similar with anime as well, there's certain arcs that often are what really solidify it as a great, but it takes quite a bit of time. And we all know, for those of us that are pretty familiar, that there is something to the way in which these stories often are being told that sort of leads to there needing to be a lot of quick, snappy things happening initially, and then you can kind of settle in. We all know, based off of how they come out, that that is a big contributor. But this first volume alone, if I never had the opportunity to read the rest of the story, or if the rest of the story tanks, I would still keep this first volume because for me it was that good and it told such a good story within that short amount of time, as well as, for me anyway, it made me very excited to read what comes next. It was kind of difficult for me to do a true first impressions because I wanted to keep going and I thought, no, I want to sit down and talk about what I thought made this first installment so fantastic before moving on. The setup for the story is that you follow this young boy whose name I'm not going to state, as it is stated at the end of the first volume, and I feel for thematic reasons it was very pivotal to have this happen in the way that it did, so I want to leave the name out of it. But you follow this young boy who is primarily identified through a physical feature that sets him apart from a lot of the other individuals in his village, which would be the fact that he has very, very long ears. He also just in general has other additional factors to his appearance that set him apart from a lot of other individuals. He's a very little boy, he's about 6 years old, and he desperately wants to explore stories, learn to read, and pursue his academics, of which are backed by his sister, who works day in and day out to try and ensure that he can pursue this. So he hardly ever sees her. They don't really have anybody taking care of them, and they live in the slums. They're very, very poor, but he makes his way every single day and he travels so that he can go to school and that he can learn. But he is picked on for looking different by the children in his school. He is picked on by the people that live in the slums with him for bothering to think that he could ever try to aspire to be more than he is. So basically stay in your place, and your place is separate and apart and beneath. And so he has these things being told to him by all of his peers, but worse is that he is being told these things essentially by the adults in his life as well, who very clearly witness the mistreatment that he faces, and they don't really step in, they don't really do anything. In fact, in a lot of ways, they perpetuate the very stereotypes that lead to people mistreating him. And the worst offense comes from an individual who manages a local library within their area, and he loves stories and he loves to read, and he so is looking forward to the idea of being whisked off on a journey, of having some hero save him from this horrible predicament he's finding himself in, and what feels like a life where there are too many obstacles for this young boy to overcome, but he at least has this hope through the stories that he reads. However, the keeper of this branch of the library does not want this particular individual dirtying up the stories. He views having a library as an indication of prestige, and to have certain people within the library he thinks brings down his status. So he's even shunned from the one thing that he has in his life that is hopeful for him. And the whole first introduction of this character is heartbreaking. But then you see some people come into the village who are from outside of it, and they are specifically not just from outside the village, but they're from a place that our main character has only heard about and that he dreams about, which is the biggest library. It's kind of the central library, and they have individuals that work there who not only maintain the texts within this library, but they go and travel to other branches, or they go to travel to help establish establish new branches of the library, they help do maintenance, they help ensure that older works are taken care of, and they repair books. And so they're going out to various places, and some of them come to this small village that our boy lives within. And his view of the world is both opened up and sadly in some ways reaffirmed through some interactions that he has with these people and that these people have with the villagers. I don't think necessarily that the first volume is trying to make you feel like, oh, see, everything is just going to be happy and perfect and everything will get better. You just have to believe. It actually kind of has a sort of crushing sense of that's not really reality within that first volume, while simultaneously doing a lot to instill in our main character a sense of pride in himself and having a confidence that does not come from other people, that doesn't come from the way that people treat you and see you, but it comes from something more internal. It's not trivializing what our main character is going through. It's just trying to, as I said, instill in him a little more confidence in himself. And this is where the thematic elements to his name, I think, were exceptionally woven into the story, as initially he, as I said before, is identified through his physical features that set him apart and make him different. And he has a hard time in a lot of ways really seeing himself as worth much of anything, because all he hears over and over and over again are all these negative things about him. And it's not until he really starts to come into his own that he, I feel like, fully embraces his name. And I feel like that moment was so pivotal. On top of all of these things that I'm talking about, these sort of heartbreaking things, there are some connections to this to one of my favorite manga series, which would be Witch Hat Atelier, and that's actually how I came to this story, as well as just seeing some recommendations in general. So I had seen some of you mention Magus at the library, and I kind of had it in my mind and written down as, okay, I want to check that out at some point. And also, I have reread Witch Hat Atelier. I've read the manga twice. I am eagerly awaiting the anime for that. And in the meantime, I thought, well, I'd like to check out some more fantasy manga, so what else can I check out? And Magus at the Library was recommended, and so I decided to hop in, and I can see not just from the fantasy elements, but there are some other additional factors that if you are a fan of Witch Hat, or if you're a fan of fantasy manga in general, or fantasy as a whole, there is a good chance that you're going to like this story. As far as the comparisons to Witch Hat Atelier, I am already seeing that there is certainly this care that the storyteller has put into, in Witch Hat Atelier, the sort of lore of magic and creating spells and the artistry that goes into that. And in this story, there's a very similar parallel to the way that they care about books and that they care about stories and they care about texts. And they care about these things in a way that you can just feel like it's this ancient thing that they are preserving, and to preserve these stories is to preserve life itself. And in some ways, it sort of is very self-aware of what it's saying, and it also has some pretty fun Easter eggs, you could say, to some other stories out there, some nods and wink wink, because sometimes some of the characters will be like, you can read a story about two brothers and alchemy, or you can read a story about pirates and adventure, and it's like they're clearly referencing other manga, which I thought was a really fun nod. Not that you have to know those things to appreciate the nod, it was just kind of like a fun, this is like a story within a story, and we appreciate stories overall. And I can be kind of picky when it comes to basically books about books, because, I don't know, sometimes it feels like unearned ways to immediately ingratiate, because it's like, well, of course I'm picking this. I'm a fan of stories, and now you're talking about, aren't stories amazing? And it's like, well, yeah. So sometimes I feel like it can be a little gimmicky, but it is done so well and with such great care that I think already I'm so appreciative of this element, but especially with how it ties to the character and sort of this awakening for him of recognizing not just the value of stories, but how his own life is a story, and he does not need to see himself as a figure in the background. He can be the hero of his own story, and it's just so well done, and it's fantastic. That element's fantastic. So the care for the actual craft of magic within Witch Hat, I think, is matched very well with the care of books and stories and texts within Magus of the Library. On top of that, there is already a very wonderfully done dynamic between a child and a mentor-like character. Something that I think really pulls me in with a lot of stories are ones that explore people in different phases of their lives. And when you have a fantasy story, you have such a great opportunity for that, because fantasy already, I think, in a lot of ways utilizes multiple perspectives. Stories that can show dynamics between young children and adults just bring in so many different types of things that are really integral to what it is to be a person. And also just to see the impact that a person can have on a child, positive and negative. And the way that it is kind of this circle in a sense where, yes, you always kind of see the adult having the ability to impact the child's life, but children in many ways can impact adults as well. There's like this renewed sense of curiosity and wonder for the world whenever you have a child enter the picture, because a lot of times people kind of get beaten down by life. And what's fun is that I think that the mentor-like character in this is a character that already sort of leans into the dramatics, which is beautiful and sweet and perfect for their interactions with the child. But while those moments feel so monumental to the kid and like, oh, I can dream big and I can think of anything, there is kind of this acknowledgement from the other adults of like, well, there they go again. There they go with their dramatics and stuff. And so it's kind of like, yeah, we know sometimes it takes a little bit of showmanship, but sometimes children just need to dream. And it's so cute and wholesome. But again, it does not shy away from those harder hitting things. And the fact that we already have gotten that within the first volume really, I think, is making me that much more excited to see what is done with the future installments as well. Additionally, given that it's fantasy, I think a lot of us wonder, what about the world? What about magic? And we get little pieces of magic in the first volume, and we get little pieces of the world, which makes me very, very excited because there is lore and there is a history that is talked about in a way that feels very much like, is that actually what happened? Or is that just the story that's been passed down? And given that there's so much emphasis on stories and the preservation of them, I do imagine that that's likely going to be explored as well. But I do look forward to seeing, because already the world is very exciting to me. And I do think that the art captures that as well. So I know I keep making comparisons to Witch Hat. The art in Witch Hat is incredible. The paneling and how the author utilizes almost this space that is not three-dimensional, but it feels like it is because of how she captures characters kind of going in and out, or the magic going in and out of different panels and the shapes that she uses. There really isn't too much like it. So the paneling, I wouldn't say, is similar in Magus of the Library. However, the artwork is incredible. It does kind of have that magical, whimsical look to it, but it's the details in some of the scenes with, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like they capture trinkets really, really well whenever you're going into a scene where you're kind of capturing a library, or you're capturing somebody who has this huge pack full of things because they're going to go on an adventure, and you see all the little things within that pack. It just adds this extra layer to the feeling that this is a very lived in and real place, and this is a real person, and these are the things they would bring with them. And then you also get these sweeping, beautiful landscape shots, and then sometimes you just get shots of a few different characters, but they look so regal. So there's so much about the artwork already that I think is stunning, and I cannot wait to see what it looks like moving forward, because currently it's already really impressed me. I don't know that I have basically any criticisms of this so far. I think it's absolutely wonderful. As I said, it could tank, and that wouldn't probably change my feelings for the first volume, because the first volume was amazing. The first volume, if I treat it as like a short story, then it was a fantastic, perfect, probably short story. I thought it was absolutely incredible. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to read more of this story. I think it's fantastic, and I will definitely be reporting in as I read through more of this to let you know my thoughts. But that's it for first impressions for Magus of the Library. For those of you that have recommended it, thank you so much, because I think that this would have probably continued to go under the radar had I not seen some recommendations alongside the fact that this was suggested for people who like Witch Hat. But I think I might have gone off in a different direction and checked out some other things instead of this had it not been for your recommendations. So thank you so much to those of you who recommended it. I cannot wait to read more, as I said. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.